Good morning, students. It's Miss Pittman. I hope this recording finds you well on this Thursday. I am away today, so I wanted to make sure that I put a recording in to help us get ready for our research quiz and just to go over a few things as we end our week and our work with our cultural research project. So, before we jump in and get started, what are we going to do today? What do I want to do? Last week, you should have completed your discussion post. And this week we're working on gathering sources. And you need to make sure by tomorrow on Friday that we have 2 to 3 legitimate sources on our gathering sources handout that we worked on class on Tuesday. And today we're going to take our research quiz. So you want to make sure that you have your research quiz done, that you have 2 sources, and that you have gotten your introductory paragraph. Listen, like real talk for a second. We don't want to get behind on this project. You're going to get to week 5, and if you haven't done all of these things, you're going to have one of those moments again, and we don't want to have that happen. Okay, so make sure that you have those things done as you continue with your week. So today, what do I want to do? I want to review for your research quiz. As you guys know, when Miss Pittman reviews, I would get out a piece of paper, I would take notes, I might even have the quiz open. So if you want to look on today's task, you can find the quiz. It's actually task 4 now after I've added all of these resources. So let's take a peek. For research projects, I will have to gather sources related to my own culture, such as food, language, music, and in order to add research. And we're also thinking about how many sources are required for this project. Where might we go to find that information? So if you go back and you look at your guide to this project, you can find the rubric. The rubric will show you exactly what is required. It says that your 3 cultural indicators associated with your own culture should be included in your thesis statement, a statement in your intro, and serve as a guide for writing your paragraphs, okay? So, interestingly enough, you have to have 3 things, and in this question, we have 3 things. I'll let you kind of ponder that for a minute. Also notice in the rubric, it says that you need to provide 3 or more examples of textual evidence, but proficient will let you have at least 2. So if you want to have more, okay, you can have more. But notice how this question asks you what is required. To be proficient, what is required is at least 2. So I'll let you ponder that for a moment. Let's look at this. On Tuesday, we talked about sources and what sources are, okay? We have books and textbooks, newspapers, and academic and trade journals. So books and textbooks are like what we see in our classes today, right? Books. So you can find lots of topics in books, right? Lots of topics in books, but what's interesting about books is a lot of times they're dated, right? We have to think about that. Newspapers are published with the latest trends, and they include opinions, things of that nature. But academic and trade journals, they are usually considered in academia. So when Miss Pittman is studying for her PhD, she spends a lot of time in academic and trade journals, right? And that's where research comes from, okay? And a lot of times, a lot of our sources start here in these trade and academic journals, move to books and textbooks, and then from there, from newspapers. So if you kind of think about it. But these are all print sources, okay? This is what you get in print. So let's look at this. So traditional print sources, we continue to think about that. So government reports and related documents. So those are going to be things that you get from the government, like the census, okay? Press releases and advertisement, those are things that are produced by companies. They tell the company's message. And it's also really important when you start thinking about this print source where the bias is coming from. what is the source's purpose and what is it trying to tell you? Because it might not be telling you the whole story. Flyers and pamphlets and leaflets, you get those in the doctor's office a lot of times. They're like sitting there about medicines or drugs, right? Or I actually like to think about it if y'all go on vacation, like especially in the mountains, you can get all those walls of flyers and pamphlets. Those are print sources, and sometimes they are biased. They're trying to sell you on something. Multimedia, y'all are known, you absorb yourself in multimedia sources. These are those sources that you get off of YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. We could argue that a lot of our press and our print sources are moving towards multimedia sources now, okay? So what does that mean for our quizzes? Choose the source list below that's considered traditional print sources. So I'll let you ponder that based on what we have on these slides. What examples we've talked about that are print sources, okay? That we have talked about that are print sources. So interestingly enough, we talked about books and newspapers and government reports as being print sources, right? What else? Internet sources. Okay, so we have internet sources that you get online. Now, this can be tricky because a lot of times you can access print sources online. So you can access an electronic book that was originally in print, but you're seeing it online. So don't get confused by that, okay? So you have to be very aware that because in our world and in our digital world that we get a lot of sources that were print that now have become digital. So when we talk about internet sources, we're talking about sources that are internet sources that have began on the internet. They were never initially anything other than internet sources. For example, a website. So if you go to a website and get information, that is initiated on the internet. A web blog or blogs, okay? Those, once again, initiated on the internet. And those are usually ways that people have created information, okay, that they're writing about. It's real time often. Message boards, discussion boards, lists, and chat rooms. Those are also real-time sources. Interestingly enough, we have the word multimedia here again. Okay, so multimedia here again as a web source means that it was originated on the web. That it never went anywhere else. It never existed anywhere else. So you have online broadcast, news, images, and audio files. Message boards and chat boards are helpful as a place to start. Okay, oftentimes you would not want to cite that as information, but it's a place to start to find more information, right? Websites is the most of the information on the internet is distributed this way. Beware, the quality might not be so great, right? Quality might not be so great. All right, so look at our questions here and see what you can do with this information. The information from websites are considered internet-only sources. Websites may vary widely in quality, so you will need to check and choose to see if the source is legitimate, right? Beware, websites are not always legitimate. Which research source would provide the most detailed information about a specific culture? Okay, so which source might you be able to find about a specific culture? Now, we haven't talked specifically what these things are, a dictionary or an encyclopedia or a thesaurus or an almanac. Those are print sources. So you need to think about which source would be the best to find information. Okay? We have more questions here. The information on websites are considered internet-only sources, and that's true. That's what's asking us here. And interestingly enough, that detailed information and encyclopedias go together, all right? All right, let's keep going. If you're referencing a famous speech, we're talking about primary sources and secondary sources. So a primary source to review. I would be a primary source if I gave you a speech and told you about something that I lived through and experienced. That is a primary source. A secondary source is where you read it from a book, okay? If you read it from a book, you read somebody's account of it, but you are not actually hearing said account, okay? that is a secondary source. Using that information, look at questions 6, 7, and 8 and see what you can do with those questions. Using that information. Primary source, first-hand information. Okay? Notice here, if you're gathering a primary source, you're looking for first-hand information. Notice how an interview is here. If you interviewed me, that's a primary source. If I gave a speech, that's a primary source. If I painted you a picture of what I saw, that is a primary source. But if you read it from a book, from an author, that is not a primary source. That is the author having talked to somebody. Or, for example, if you did all of these things and then you wrote this down in a paper and turned it in, your paper then becomes a secondary source, even though you used primary sources in it. Okay? What else do I have here? Acceptable and not acceptable. Okay, Wikipedia. I know we've talked about it. It is not acceptable to quote Wikipedia in your paper. But it is acceptable to page down to the bottom and see what primary and secondary sources that Wikipedia has used to create that reference. And then you may cite those sources, okay? You want to make sure that you are citing sources that are legitimate, that aren't heavily biased to one side or the other. You want them to make sure that they are telling the whole story. Now, does it mean that you cannot cite a biased source? No. But you can also, when you cite a biased source, you need to be aware that you're doing it. So if you explain to me, if you're writing a paper about gun control, and you cite something from the NRA, and you have to explain to your reader that this is the NRA and this association wants less gun control laws because of XYZ, then that is okay. But you can't cite from the NRA and not explain those biases, okay? What else do I have here? More questions. More questions. Wikipedia, blog posts, and websites with non-identifiable authors are acceptable sources are unacceptable sources and should not be used. Think about that question. Wikipedia should not be used, but how can it to be a legitimate source? So we just talked about those things. If you can identify the author, you don't know where their sources come from, you shouldn't use it because you don't know whether it's true or not. Wikipedia, we can't cite Wikipedia, right? But we can use it as a place to start, and those references that exist at the bottom are a way for us to do so. Okay? So, for the remainder of the day, since Ms. Pittman is away and we have this video, I want you to use this time to take the quiz. But what is also great, let me see if I can get my screen up, is that if you check out in the OHS, you have a little Quizlet here. When you click on that Quizlet, my computer's awful slow this morning in the OHS. When you click on this Quizlet, you can play the game. Okay, you can play the game and start matching everything up. Okay, but I actually don't like it in this game. Let me tell y'all how I like to play with this. I like to play with this as flashcards. Give it just a second. I find that a lot easier. So the flashcards are a lot easier to play with. Okay, so click to flip and then you can see the question, the answer. Okay, so that's how I like to play with it. I recommend that you have this Quizlet open to help you with your quiz, okay? Make sure you have that open to help you with your... I hope you guys are having a great week. If you have any questions or concerns as you work through your quiz, feel free to reach out to Miss EW. I will be back on Monday, but reach out to Miss EW if you have any questions about the quiz or as you work to gather your two sources. I can't wait to see everybody back in class on Tuesday. I hope that you're having a great week. I hope that you found this helpful as you take your quiz, and I will see everybody on Tuesday.